We just got the reveal for Galbrena's signature weapon, and I can't help but think one thing. What happened to damage amplification? Now, for those who don't know, damage amplification is actually the strongest stat in the entire game. In the damage formula for Wuthering Waves, damage amplification is almost at the very end. The only thing that actually comes after damage amplification is damage taken, or vulnerability. It doesn't really have a clear name, but in the kit it's usually written as damage taken. And it's quite a rare thing to see, so damage amplification is, for almost every single character in the game, the final thing being taken into account in the damage formula. It used to only be seen on outro skills, but ever since Phoebe, we've been seeing it directly in character kits, as well as in weapon passives, which greatly diminishes the value of actual outro skills. So I wanted to talk a bit about what happened to damage amplification and why is it so common now, starting with how it was at first. Damage amplification was basically only seen in outro skills. Outro skills were the core mechanic of WuWa, and they still are. And the outro skills giving such a tremendous buff to your character, essentially functioning like a direct multiplier, made it an incredibly powerful way to buff, and a really good incentive to actually engage with the concerto system. And it stayed like this for almost a year. A good outro skill alone could make you easily the best in slot support for a character. Yinlin was Shengliao's best partner for hypercarry teams because she had a perfect outro skill for him. And sure, Yinlin also had other benefits like high personal damage if you had String Master, as well as the capability to run Empyrean Anthem. But you get the point here, right? Simply having an incredibly powerful outro skill could instantly make you the best in slot support for a character that you are able to buff. But ever since Phoebe, we've kind of seen this become less and less important. Phoebe is also actually the biggest example of this. Phoebe gives herself 256% damage amplification on her Forte Heavy attack in her Absolution mode, assuming enemies are hit with Spectrofrazzle. This singular part of Phoebe's kit has made giving Phoebe a dedicated buffer incredibly hard. Now obviously I understand Kuro doesn't want to give Phoebe a dedicated buffer, they want her to be the Zani support. That's what she's intended to be. But that's not the point of this video. Phoebe is incredibly hard to find a very good support for, to the point where characters like Ciaccona, who only just do damage and apply Spectrofrazzle, end up becoming some of Phoebe's best teammates. Phoebe really can't be buffed that hard by an outro skill. Sure, 38% damage amplification to her heavy attack is nice, but she's already getting over 250% on her own, not even counting a Shorekeeper or a Verena outro skill. Which means that it's almost impossible to find a good buffer for this character. What we're really looking at with Phoebe is never the outro skill. It's almost always about personal damage, other buffs, and field time. For example, Mortefi is good with Phoebe not because of the 38% damage amplification to heavy attacks, but because he's able to give 50% attack with all of his buffs combined, which is quite a good amount. He also has a pretty short rotation time, making him one of Phoebe's better supports. And like I said earlier, Ciaccona doesn't really give that much value outside of personal damage and applying Spectrofrazzle in multi-wave and AoE, and yet she's still one of Phoebe's best teammates. Let's look at Iuno. She also has a 50% heavy attack damage amplification on her outro skill, but she still ends up being pretty relative to Mortefi because what you're really looking at with this character is her personal damage and her field time. So ultimately, Iuno ends up being relative to other options like Mortefi and Sanhua instead of just being straight up better, despite actually having a stronger outro skill. Phoebe's own kit makes it incredibly hard to give her a buffer, and this is something that we're gonna notice with other characters too. Branson Cantarella didn't really have this, but then we move over to Zani, and we see that this is the character that gets the most amount of damage amplification in the entire game in her full team. Her weapon gives her 50%, her passive gives her 20%. You're using Phoebe, which is 100%. You get such an absurd amount of damage amplification on this character that it's really hard to justify getting any more. Zani is also the perfect showcase of just how overloaded you can get on damage amplification. Phoebe gives 100%, which is a ridiculous amount of amplification to give to a character's abilities. If you take away that 100% amplification, suddenly the 50% from Zani's signature weapon becomes a lot more relevant. This is the exact reason why Pridwin has 2 calculations for Zani's weapons. Because Phoebe's Ultra skill gives so much damage amplification that Zani's signature weapon unironically becomes less important if you just have a Phoebe on your team. Ciaccona almost fell into this exact same trap, because she also gives 100% damage amplification on her Ultra skill. But luckily, Kuro decided to learn from their mistakes with Zani, and Cartethyia barely does any air erosion damage herself, only doing it on her plunging attack, and thus she ends up not really overloading on damage amplification much. However, something we can see on Cartethyia is that her weapon, yet again, gives damage amplification. 20% to be exact. Why did we take this buff that was almost exclusive to Ultra skills and start applying it on weapons and directly within the character's kit? Because Cartethyia also has damage amplification in her own kit. Her ultimate finisher gains 20% damage amplification for every stack of area erosion that's on the target, up to a maximum of 5, leading to, yet again, 100% damage amplification. Giving any other amplification effects will simply just not be that relevant because she's already getting so much. It feels like on a lot of the newer characters, especially DPS ones, damage amplification gets thrown on because Kuro started realizing that this is an incredibly powerful stat. But the more of a stat you give to a character, the less important it ends up becoming. And it also works the inverse, which we're going to see with Phrolova. The less damage amplification you have, the more important it becomes to have it. Phrolova is a unique case, because a lot of her damage profile is from off the field from Hecate, which means you're not really able to benefit much off of Ultra skills. However, they decided to have a really wacky solution with this. Give damage amplification to Echo skills on her signature weapon. Yep, because that's an amazing idea and definitely isn't going to lead to ridiculous weapon power creep. Oh, what? It's 40% better than the standard weapon? Yeah, this just proves the power of damage amplification. When a character does not have damage amplification available to them, giving them more damage amplification is going to be a huge buff no matter what way you look at it. Her weapon gives damage amplification to Echo skills specifically, because Echo skills are the ones that can't benefit from Ultra skills, at least on Phrolova. Because, well, like I said earlier, Hecate is off the field, and when you swap out, an Ultra skill gets cancelled. And then the final character to talk about that has additional damage amplification in their kit that isn't from an Ultra skill is Iuno, with her Blessing of the One Light buff. Now, the Blessing of the One Light buff is an interesting one, because it is yet another good showing of how damage amplification can become oversaturated. Because, well, Augusta's already getting 15% from Shorekeeper and 50% from Iuno's Ultra skill, which means the additional 40% isn't helping you as much as you think, especially since it needs time to stack up. So for Augusta, Blessing of the One Light is not that powerful of a buff. But for Iuno herself, it is the thing that makes Ciaccona her best support when she's being ran as a main DPS. Because, well, why would you give damage amplification with someone like a Yinlin or a Genshin when you could just pick the character with the faster rotation time because you're already getting damage amplification from your own kit? And now Galbrena is getting damage amplification on her weapon as well, and I will not be surprised if putting damage amplification in kits and weapons will be the norm going forward, thus making Ultra skills less relevant in the future, and meaning that Ultra skills are less big of a factor when looking at a sub-DPS's relevance. But that's just my opinion on Ultra skills. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, best to join my Discord server, which is linked in the description. And if you want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked in the description. I don't really post consistently, but I just kind of post about whatever I feel like. But that'll be all from me. Peace.